Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in again. It's Wednesday night. That means it's time for question and answers. We're going to do something a little bit different this week. I've got a couple guests with me who are probably pretty familiar to most of you. Garrett, Bryce.
Hey, guys.
Both of them are in from school. Bryce has just finished his first year at Louisville Dental School.
Yep.
Garrett has one more year at Freed Hardeman, and then following maybe your brother to dental school somewhere.
We will see, yeah.
We will see. One of the questions that we received, and I thought was a wonderful question, which is why I asked you guys to sit in with us today, was how does the church, how do we fix the problem of so many young people losing their faith in college and not remaining faithful? Now, there's a lot we can talk about and unpack, okay?
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you guys some very specific questions. But before we begin, I want to share with you all something. Moms and dads, there's a book I think all of you should read. Elders, preachers, it's called Faith for Exiles. It is the written discussion and answers of a study that was done for 18 to 29-year-olds, which is you guys and your generation. And a lot of questions were asked about faith and understanding. The way the book frames the study is very simple. That you guys live in digital Babylon, which basically means is you're a lot like Daniel and his friends, okay? You're pilgrims in an unholy land, Indiana Jones would say. We see our worlds becoming more secular. I think you guys we could talk about that for days.
Right.
We see the church having less significance in the world's commonplace day-to-day thoughts as it didn't used to. And as a rule, less people are attending church services now than there were 20 years ago. All the numbers are not doom and gloom, though, okay? What we're finding is that America still has one of the highest rate of evangelical Christians, which we would technically fit under that quality, okay? I reject it a little bit, but we're those guys to the most part.
Yeah.
Respect the Bible first, model the church after first century principles. You get the idea.
Yeah.
Okay? Amongst evangelicals, what we're finding is your generation, okay? If you are remaining faithful from your earliest up till you go off to college, that most of you are actually remaining faithful through college, okay? It's like 2/3. Now, out of the 1/3 that leaves, we're finding that later, some are actually coming back, okay? But there's principles that guide this. How much you attend, how much your family is involved, the community that's built around you, okay? So there's a lot of factors that play into it. So I want to talk about those factors today with you guys, okay? So the questions I think are worth asking, getting your response from, are very simple. What have you observed among your friends, okay? Those that have remained faithful and those who haven't. What qualities seem to have been common, as they grew up? And what do you think were the keys that kept them faithful in college in circumstances that have driven others away? I think, Garrett, I think you're going to tackle this one.
I think one thing that I've noticed amongst my friends, and including myself, just something that you just kind of pick up on as you're growing up. You feel a sense of interconnectedness with your peers who are in the church. I know me and Bryce both, we attend Germany Church of Christ, and there's not a big youth group there. We found those friends in other places, growing up in school. We found our group of friends who were Christian, who were a good influence on us. And I think that the biggest thing is having those people to rely on, having them to lift you up while you also help them. And I think just having that good influence is really what keeps you in the church, and just having those people to fall back on. Because whenever you're at that age, of course, teen years, they are way beyond me. But whenever you are growing up, you notice that it's really important to find a group, whether it's in school, whether it's at church. Teens long for a sense of belonging, I think. And finding a group is really important to them. And they're going to find that group one way or another. And I think that making sure that that group is in the church and they are good Christian people, that's very imperative, because if they don't get that group, they'll find it amongst other friends who may not be so beneficial to their relationship with God.
Now, that doesn't stop in college, does it?
Oh, absolutely not. I would say it's even more important in college to find that group, because you're separated more from your family once you reach that stage, and you're more on your own. So you're going to be more dependent on others. And so finding a group who can keep you accountable.
You no longer have mom and dad telling you to get up for church.
Exactly.
You no longer have, that family influence.
Do you all think, and maybe we can use some biblical terms, God made tribes, right?
Yeah.
And tribes were important to the Israelite people.
Mm-hmm.
They had things in common. They worshipped, they taught, they fought alongside their brothers and sisters.
Correct.
Family is important. Maybe perhaps the second most important thing God ever made. You think about the church, then family. They're right alongside each other.
Yeah.
You don't get family at school with you usually. You go off to college, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like you said, mom and dad aren't there to wake you up. So what happens from your experience, okay, if the tribe that you are most closely associated with and you have different thoughts theologically? What happens when, I don't know, let's say, Bryce, you go to an environment where you're the one person in a group of 15 who says, okay, Sunday morning I need to go to worship?
Yeah, well, it's not easy. I actually have I think a pretty unique experience where I've been to both Freed Hardman, which is filled with literally any friend you'll make there is going to be somebody that's going to tell you, hey, we need to go to church. We need to go to church Wednesdays, Sunday night, Sunday morning. You're going to have people ask you to come to devotionals on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday nights. You're going to have, all of this motivation to be the best Christian you can be. And that just comes naturally from these friends at a place like Freed. And then on the other hand, I've just spent a year at University of Louisville, and two very different places. And I can say my time at Louisville has been probably pretty similar to what it would be like at any state school. You no longer have that influence. You no longer have that big group of friends pushing you to be, to remain faithful. So and for the most part, I have been on my own. I've really done good about going to church and still doing those things, even though I'm kind of more independent now. But that's only because I've been equipped from the time I was born, even through college, to really do those things. So if you're not as maybe well taught as that, Neil, or if you haven't always had that influence and you're just kind of thrown out into the water, I think it's really, really hard for young people to commit to something like that just on their own. You really, really have to have, it's almost like a group effort to just remain faithful. And I was telling you off camera just a few minutes ago, like, I think, and we both agree, I think we all agree that college is absolutely the most crucial time in a young person's life in regards to their faith. So if you can just get through those 4 years of college and come out of that still a faithful Christian, I think you'll be really good later on in life. But it's hard. It's hard to do that.
Have you ever thought all the tough choices we put on college students who are woefully unprepared for that decision? You have to decide at 18 or 19 what you want to do with the rest of your life.
Oh, for sure.
And I'm still deciding.
Wait, it gets better though. You also have to decide most of the time who you're going to marry, and you're not always looking in the right place or know what to be looking for. And let's be honest, your next 40 to 50 years are sometimes either hampered by 4 years of bad choices or blessed by 4 years of good choices that are not always based on all the right reasons. Sometimes people just fall into the right choices.
Yeah.
I think to myself, from 18 to 21, I didn't know anything. And I'm not saying that about you guys or anyone else. I was a complete, I don't know, just imbecile as an 18 to 21-year-old. You know, there were things important to me then that are not important to me now. Yet those things that I did then still impact me today.
Right.
And I look at those years, and moms and dads, I encourage you to look at those years too, as the 4 to 5 most important years of anyone's life.
Right.
Because
Probably, yeah.
they're not, and you use this example, you know, they're not the time you're always filled with the best examples. So you have to make your own choices, stand by yourself.
Right.
And it's hard to stand when you're different. It's the time in life where you tend to collect the tribe that's important to you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Your spouse, your best friends, the people who you call when you need them, you tend to collect in your college years more than you do any time else.
Right.
And man, your faith, as a general rule, shouldn't be parked in the closet and left at home. I'm afraid some people think of the college years as a reprieve. Okay? We talk about adolescence, right? And I believe that adolescence is a myth, that people should just be allowed to make mistakes and we shouldn't hold them accountable. Oh, they're just young people. Nonsense.
Yeah.
Nonsense, okay? There's a passage, perhaps my favorite passage in all of Scripture, talking about young people. Paul was writing to Timothy, okay? I figured you know where I was going with this.
Passage.
And he says in 1 Timothy 4 and verse 12, let no one despise you, look down on you because of your age, right?
Yes.
Because that's what we as a generation do. Okay, we grow and we mature and we say, well, they're young, they don't know anything, right?
And we blow it off. It's okay if they mess up. It's, you know, it's not a big deal.
He says, let no one look down on you for youth. Why? Okay, so that you can be an example to the believers in word, conduct, love, spirit, faith, and in purity. Now, I read those words and I think to myself, that's the opposite of how we treat adolescents.
Yeah.
Go sow your wild oats now. No,
Yeah.
I reject that entirely. I've told you all before, and I've said this in sermons, I hate the prayer when we pray for the church of tomorrow, our young people. Because you're as much the church today as you will be then. Now let's be honest, you put less in the collection plate now, right? You aren't qualified to serve as elders or deacons, okay? As a typical rule, you're not teaching Bible classes, you're not being a leader of a ministry, so you're kind of just shuffled as, well, they're bit parts, right? They're just background characters. I hate that.
Yeah.
I don't think a person, when they say that, is trying to overlook you, but I think we do that because young people, as a rule, are overlooked.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, I think, the church's problem. I don't think that's your problem. I don't think you have earned that, okay, by your behavior and your actions. But I think we have become, I don't know if obtuse is the right word, or just ignorant of the talents of so many people that were wasted because they were younger than we thought they needed to be.
Yeah.
And that talent hadn't earned its place yet.
Yeah.
I struggle with that. So I guess my big question would be to you all. How do we, as the church, do better? How do we surround you with more people, okay? How do we equip you with more, maybe not just knowledge, because some people know a lot but can't put it into practice. How do we help you become wise? You know, how do we help? What could we do? Maybe draw on some of your experiences of things we did well, okay?
Right.
And maybe then be honest, give us some honest feedback of things we could have done better.
Yeah. Do you want me to go, or do you have
I
anything?
got something in mind real quick. I think whenever you talk about young people, it's important to understand like how they're going to impact the church presently as well as in the future, as you brought up. I think young people are an investment, so to speak, in the church. And whenever you talk about an investment, you don't want to just say, oh, they'll have their time in the future. You don't want to say, oh, well, they'll bear fruits later on. Whenever you talk about investment, you want to nurture that investment. You want to see what it's capable of the entire time it's growing to its full fruition. And I think that during the teenage and the young years, there's a lot of ability for young people to grow the church, be able to help the church. I think getting us involved at a young age keeps us involved at a later age.
Does it become habitual?
It does become that way. So I've learned as being involved in the church, even at my age, that it's just natural at this point to want to be involved, to want to impact the church and want to impact others around me. And I think that is going to stick with me, I would assume.
Yeah, go ahead.
And what I was just really going to hit on was, you're talking about things that maybe the church could do better is, I think that building a connection with, like you were talking about earlier, mentors, building a connection obviously with your peers is a huge, important thing that maybe we could focus on. I didn't personally experience this as much in my high school years, but I know that obviously, we're talking about college being this big important thing. You have to build your kids up before they get to college, right? So middle school, high school, you want to, like Garrett was talking about, you want to nurture those kids and invest in them. I didn't necessarily experience this, but I've met plenty of people at Freed who had awesome youth ministers growing up. They did all sorts of, we talk about doing these cool activities, which is cool. And we've done things like that, Neil. We've been canoeing, skiing, things like that.
Church camp, mission trips.
Church camp, mission trips. And those are all great, but on top of that, you want to make sure that those kids are not just attending, that they're building those connections, growing roots into the church, so that when they are in college finally, they'll have something that grounds them there.
Yeah.
They don't want to just be tossed in the wind and blown away.
Sure.
So I think that's just really important. Having somebody that they can text or call, about spiritual problems and not feel uncomfortable about it, And this can be older people, it can be younger people, people their age. It doesn't matter. Just making the church something to a kid that's not like taboo, I even remember there was a time in my life where I felt like in middle school, like it was kind of weird to talk about just church or anything spiritually outside of church.
Right. Yeah. Especially at the lunch table at school.
Yeah, you just don't bring that up. And that's how I felt, at a younger age. But I think maybe if the church could ever get to a place where, there's lots of churches these days, Neil, that have, their kids for, preschools. They have, there's lots of, Christian schools out there and things like that. You don't have to have those things to build these connections, but I think the main thing is it's really, really important for parents to start those, because all this starts at the home, and
Sure.
And if parents place a high value on these things, then the kids are going to see that.
When I was a youth minister, just to share with you guys, I always told everyone, I don't want to replace your parents. I want to sit alongside of them. And when you can't talk to your parents about something, you can talk to me about it.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to replace. Just wanted to be another voice in those kids' head.
Yeah.
And, we don't have a full-time youth minister here in our county, but I know there are people who are you could call, that are voices in your head. People I know that if you said, hey, I'm struggling, I just want to talk to someone, and I really don't want to admit it to my mom and dad right now.
You need that. Listen, let's be honest. Kids are not going to tell their parents everything.
No. There's consequences with telling my parents that I don't have
Exactly.
if I tell Neil or Colby or Tommy.
And that's just the truth of life. But giving kids that extra option, kids really need that.
There's another passage about Timothy that I think is worth bringing up here. In 2 Timothy 1, I would point out that Paul was that guy to Timothy. He's not his father, even though he calls him his son in the faith. So they're close, but he talks about how in verse 3, that I thank God whom I serve with a pure conscience, my forefathers did, as without ceasing I remember you in my prayers night and day. Now this is someone who's not his blood relative. They're brothers in Christ, a son and father in the faith relationship. I pray for you regularly, right?
Yeah.
And he says, I greatly desire to see you, being mindful of your tears, that I may be filled with joy. And I call to remembrance the genuine faith that's in you, which dwelt first in your grandmother and your mother. I'm persuaded is in you also. All of us are here because of someone else, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's family. With you guys, it's mom and dad, grandparents. With me, it's mom and dad and grandparents, right?
Yeah.
All of us have someone who shares that faith with us and is our first connection to Christ. And that needs to be parents. We know that, okay? But if that's all we have, I think you hit the nail on the head. There's something we're missing. There just is. And if it's a tribe of people our age, if it's these mentors we have, the church has a responsibility to provide like a village would for the growth of those children.
Right.
It's an age-old saying that it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a church to raise a Christian. Yes, it really does. And I believe personally that we would rather farm off that responsibility to someone else than do it ourselves. A lot of times youth ministers are hired with that purpose in mind. Well, he'll just take care of the kids, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times the older members in our congregation don't know the teenagers who go on the mission trip, don't know the people who go to camp, and are unwilling to be beneficial and helpful when we have VBS or anything. Maybe they've already put in their time. Maybe they've retired. Maybe they feel there's too much age and they can't connect. Those are the people who need to be connecting with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you need to be connecting with them. There's a couple of older people who come here, and you guys know them and I know them.
Yeah.
They go to camp, they go on mission trips with us, and you all don't know this, but the world's going to know this now. I purposefully invite them to every single one of those events because I want them around you, and I want you around them, and I want our mission trip to be representative of the churches in our community. VBS to be representative of churches in our community. And yes, maybe there's just young people up on the stage as we sing silly songs. And maybe the vast majority of people who go on the mission trip are under the age of 30. But that's not all of us.
Yeah.
And I think a real struggle the church has is we compartmentalize our groups. And we're like, all right, well, the young people are doing this tonight. And the senior citizens are doing this. And the married couples are doing this. And we really struggle to have generational connection outside of worship.
Right.
And so that means it's hard to get it inside of worship because I don't know them. We don't have anything in common with them, but we've been going to church here together for 15 years.
Yeah.
In your realm, I think it is the bigger divide than anywhere else.
Yeah.
That we as a whole, and I love your investment analogy.
Yeah.
We invest in them when they're little, and we invest in them when they're a little bit bigger, and a little bit bigger, and a little bit bigger, hoping one day to cash that out. Right, and it meets its potential. I'd like to think that I haven't met mine yet, and I'm twice your age. So I'm hoping that those people older than me are still investing in me. That's why I want to invest in you guys, and I want you to invest in Molly and Max. And I think that we look at this example of Paul saying, I've invested in you, but I'm not the only one. And I'm not even the only generation. Your grandmother, who's a generation older than me, has invested in you, and now I'm investing in you. To me, the Bible analogy is very simple. David was called to be king as a boy, but didn't become a king till he was a man. And it took years to prepare him to be king.
Yeah.
Yet God had already set him apart when he was younger than you two. Okay?
Right.
And when he was younger than you two, he probably killed Goliath. And he was younger than you two, he was already fighting battles for Israel. They weren't saying, all right, well, when you become king, you're useful. No, he was useful that day, but he wasn't king. And so the church as a whole, I think, needs to look at you guys as Davids. You're the shepherd boy who can kill Goliath, who can write psalms.
If you say so, dude.
I think you can. And I want us to put you on that battlefield a bit more often.
Yeah. And
I
agree. And
have confidence. I mean, it's shocking to me that we sometimes think young people can't do anything. And David and Goliath is the most famous story in Scripture. And that boy was probably the youngest one there. And he showed all of them up by saying, today I believe in God more than any of you do.
Yeah.
Right.
and I'll act on it. So I appreciate this conversation. Like, I think we need to have this more often. And I think we need to have it very frankly with each other. I want to see the numbers decrease of people your age that are remaining faithful. I want to...
You mean...
Get the backwards.
And I got that backwards. I want to see more.
Not that.
I want to see more of you remaining faithful. Sorry, I was thinking two thoughts ahead. I want to see the numbers increase of you remaining faithful and decrease of you leaving the church.
Yes. Yeah.
Forgive me. It's possible in my mind because investment is possible.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it's just what we already do with a little bit of a steroid shot to it.
Yeah.
I agree. Maybe parents getting out of their comfort zones, having conversations with kids about spiritual things they wouldn't normally have.
Yeah.
Pushing your kids to make those connections we've talked about.
Is it okay, you think, to expect more of our young people?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. For years, I have thought that we expect so little of you, and that's wrong. We need to expect more than just not doing this and not doing that, but actually doing something great.
As long as our kids, don't drink or do drugs, they're good. That's what we think.
It's such low expectations of you.
Very low expectations.
A lot of untapped potential.
Untapped potential. Ask more. Expect more. But you know what? That is probably a bigger indictment of the church as a whole. We probably don't expect enough of Christians. And so that just filters down into you guys. Because if I don't expect that much of 40-year-old Jim Bob, right? What am I going to expect a 40-year-old Jim Bob Jr. or 20-year-old Jim Bob Jr.?
Yeah.
Even less.
Yeah.
And so the church maybe has an expectation problem that we just expect so little of our members. If you're here for 4 hours a week, you're faithful.
Yeah.
Well, what are you doing with the other 724 hours of your week?
Exactly.
I mean, you could be invalidating that 4 hours of faithfulness by what you're doing everywhere else. So we need to invest in you more.
Yeah.
We need to provide opportunities for you more, but we need to take our investments and maybe our investments aren't bad. We're just not having enough of them. Is that fair?
Fair to say.
Well, guys, thanks so much. I have a feeling that we could talk about this again. Maybe we'll get a couple of other people your age and maybe ask them some. Yeah. I'm just grateful Bryce and Garrett could be with us today. They're young people, so keep them in your prayers, just like Paul kept Timothy. Yeah. And don't expect so little of them, right? I might encourage you today, moms and dads at home, to do a couple of things. There's 2 or 3 books I think are worth checking out. One we mentioned earlier was Faith for Exiles by David Kinnaman. There's another one called Do Hard Things, written by Alex and Brett Harris. And another one called Unchristian that was written by this Kinnaman man. Read all of them because they are targeted at young people. And when you're done, check out a book written by Kenda Creasy-Dean called Almost Christian. It talks about how a lot of these young people we are raising are 3/4 of what they're supposed to be, but they're missing that one important quarter that matters. A stick-to-itiveness, a faithfulness that lasts in college. Take time to read those and look over those. I know this has been a bit different. We haven't just dug deep into Scripture, but I hope this has helped you, and I hope that you're praying for our young people and their effectiveness as the church of tomorrow and today.
And today, yeah.
And today. Because we are not the church of just 40 and up. We are also the church of 40 and under. And we're asking the question, why are our young people leaving? Maybe it's because we're not putting them to work. I don't know. It's just my thoughts, but I think there's some evidence behind that. So guys, thanks.
Thank you, Neil.
At home, thank you so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful day.
See ya.